Good afternoon and welcome to another 9 to 5 podcast. We have with us Seth, Mike, and Mark, and my name is Scott. So if you guys all just want to say hi really quick.
Hi.
Hi.
And apparently, Mark, did we lose you?
Sorry,
Yeah,
I was muted.
There we go. Okay.
How's everything?
You just wanted a great introduction and not say anything after. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about Apple Anonymous, which is a lot of employees going onto Twitter and social media and kind of venting in ways that Apple isn't quite happy about, but they're kind of having a lot of controversy there. We're also going to talk about the new two-factor authentication for Apple IDs, the new VP of Technology, Kevin Lynch, who comes from Adobe. And if we have some extra time, we'll also talk about Samsung's smartwatch and Google Now and some other topics that are going on right now. So let's jump right into it with an Apple Anonymous. So Mark, you wrote up the really awesome article with Apple Anonymous. Do you kind of just want to summarize it and talk about what the main points were with it?
Sure. Have we tweeted out the YouTube for people to watch live yet?
I can do it.
Yeah, is anyone even here?
No, it's just us talking. Let's do that, and then we'll continue.
This guy didn't understand the two-step video on Twitter. Oh, that's funny.
We're live, Mike.
But yeah, it hadn't been tweeted yet.
Tweeted.
Now it's tweeted. Hey, everybody.
I know, but it's still recorded for later.
Oh, well. It's a public tweet. It's funny. I was waiting to see how many people wouldn't get it because I was afraid that at first, like when I put it up there, that people wouldn't.
Okay, so we wrote up this article about the Apple Anonymous. We called it a secret society, and basically it's where a lot of retail employees from Apple's retail chain actually go to vent after or during work. There's been lots of controversy over the last few years of Apple retail employees simply not being happy, and it seems that Apple's not giving these employees the correct resources and outlets to vent their frustrations. So many of the people that we've talked to who have these anonymous Twitter accounts and Google Plus accounts, they've been telling us that Apple doesn't give them a proper outlet, so they had to create their own. And that creation was this Apple Anonymous Society on Twitter. And they talk about bad customer interactions, things they're not happy with. During the short time frame where John Browett was running Apple Retail, he did a lot of job cutbacks, pay cuts, and some other controversial policies that the employees were just not happy about, and that sparked a lot of new accounts and lots of new discussion online. And on the surface, whatever, it's cool, but we really looked into it, and it's really an interesting phenomenon, and I think our story portrays that. We found Paul Brown, who's the creator of the first account. This guy has over 12,000 Twitter followers. That's a lot of people following these customer interactions. So for the first time we found him, we revealed who he is, and it was sad. We found out that he was actually asked to leave Apple because they discovered his identity behind that Genius Bartails account. And we questioned a lot of people after we learned that, and we were interested to find that their people are not really that concerned about that. Like, they really want to get the word out about what's going on behind the scenes. So yeah, and we also talked to a couple Apple retail employees who actually did not know about the online anonymous personalities. One person told us that, wow, that's cool, I'd join that in a heartbeat, but I would want to do it without hiding my identity. People need to know what's going on, and I have nothing to hide. Another person didn't want to be a part of it because they're really happy with Apple. I mean, it's not everyone. There are a few hundred accounts, active accounts right now, with more growing since the Browett time and since a report went out. But yeah, it's a big deal. There's 40,000 employees, a few hundred accounts. People work with each other that don't know they're interacting with each other daily online. So it's just so interesting in so many different ways. And if you haven't read our report yet, I really encourage you to do so.
Do you think that Apple has always had this kind of environment where everything's very hectic, and it seems like they're expecting people to just be worker bees rather than people that are thinking different?
Have you heard about like the Steve Jobs frantic late night phone calls?
Wasn't it? No, no.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were lots of stories or whatever that he would call engineers and whatnot, wake them up in the middle of the night, make them go do this, make them go do that. It was not a happy place. And, recent reports are talking about like how Cook doesn't do that type of stuff these days. So I think in terms of the corporate side, Apple used to be more hectic. It's probably still hectic, but it's a little better. But with the retail employees, I mean, it's so weird. Like when you walk into an Apple store, you would never think there's so many unhappy people who are paid to play with computers all day.
Well, that's one thing I was going to bring up. Do you feel like there's a disconnect between corporate and the actual retail stores? Like one thing that you brought up in the article was the fearless feedback.
Oh, right, yeah.
There's a lot of frustration where do you want to kind of talk about fearless feedback and the frustrations with it?
I agree with what you just said, that there seems to be a disconnect between corporate and the actual people on the floor in the retail stores who actually represent the company. Like, you don't know who's behind the scenes building your iPhone or developing your iPhone. You know who's selling it to you, going to one of Apple's stores. And those people are not the ones developing the programs in the different venues that they go to for complaints. That's completely on the retail corporate structure. And it seems that there is really that disconnect because the corporate retail side created this fearless feedback system and the anonymous surveys that are not truly anonymous that ask for employee feedback. And employees are not positively taking those approaches. They don't like those outlets, and that's why they had to create their own.
Yeah, it seems like, from what I understand, the fearless feedback, whenever somebody tries to bring something up, then it seems like it's shot down if it has to be negative. So
right, and it's really let's say me and you were both specialists or geniuses at an Apple store. It's really between me and you. If I have a problem with something that you did, or if you have a problem with something I did, it's me and you dealing with that personally. There's no higher structure or person or outlet to go to for that really care.
Okay.
That's just what we've heard and what we understand from lots of people who run these accounts.
So do you think, I mean, Apple has always been pushing for the think different, of course, the whole campaign, and just the whole idea behind Apple has been thinking different. But now it seems like with retail, it's a little bit different compared to corporate or the people creating the products. When it comes to retail, they're expecting for people to follow the same policies or procedures that they develop. So is it that they're not expecting people to come up with better ways, they just want people to follow the same ways?
Right. We thought it was interesting. We looked at the Steve Jobs Think Different campaign, and there's this line about like misfits, rebels, and all that. And it's kind of ironic. I mean, that's what the company was founded on, those values. I mean, that's a real Steve Jobs, line. But when you think about it, that's not really what you want your company to be with $100 billion in the bank right now. So it's kind of ironic that these people going on with these masks, bags on their heads, and all sorts of different stuff on Google Hangouts and tweeting all sorts of stuff about their jobs at Apple. I mean, that's really rebellious, and that's being misfits. So, we kind of took that to be a bit ironic, and 30 years into the past. No, it shouldn't be something going on right now.
Yeah, I think, Seth, do you wanna chime in there?
Oh yeah. So I've been following this for a while, and Mark's obviously been keeping us in the loop on the project that turned out to be the article. I think what's most amazing about it, or what's most interesting about it, is that you have this whole community of people who have to be anonymous. If they're not anonymous, they lose their jobs. But you have this social network of anonymous people that are communicating, and you can kind of get to see what's going on the ground if you follow some of these people, and you can see that if a new PR or HR directive comes out, everybody's pissed off about it, and you can kind of get a feel of what's going on inside the Apple stores because of these people who are talking about what's happening. So I think that's that was the interesting thing that drew me in earlier, and with Mark's report, it's kind of like blown up that idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it seems the whole rebel mentality really works when you're an underdog, and that was working well when Apple was below Microsoft. They're trying to get as much market share as possible. But now that they have so much market share when it comes to iOS and all of their other products, it seems they're trying to say, okay, when you're coming up with new products, you can be a rebel and not really follow the same ways of doing things in terms of building a product. But when it comes to people who are just lower level employees for doing either Apple Care support or in store, it's something where they just expect, hey, it's worked. People love retail, so it must work, so follow what we say. Does that sound right?
Yeah, yeah. And what I'm really, really hoping for, and I know the Seth and the other 9to5 staffers, I mean, we didn't just do this post just to expose this thing, even though it is a really big deal. I mean, we really care, like we cover the company extensively and we care for their employees, and the employees need to be happy. So we're hoping that, Apple Corporate takes a look at this. I'm sure they are, and, there needs to be some change happening.
Yeah.
I mean, there's clearly, like Tim Cook is promising change. I remember lots of people who were sitting in on the internal town hall meeting in January. They told me that Cook was making a huge deal about we know that there's employees in our retail stores who are not happy, and we're working on that extensively. But there really hasn't been much since then.
He was also doubling down on secrecy.
Yeah, Seth and I both cringed when you said that.
What is the cringe for?
Whatever. But I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so we're hoping that something comes out of this, and we're looking forward to hearing positive change.
Okay. Let's go into the two-factor authentication that came out for the Apple IDs. So now you can use Find My iPhone or an SMS device to actually get another login or another factor for that authentication. So does this kind of hint at the security measures that they've been making? I know that they hired more security people. They're starting to get more patents that have to do with fingerprint scanning. So does this have to do more with the security measures in the future?
That's
that
interesting.
Apple's taking?
Yeah, I haven't thought of that. I don't think anyone really said anything about that. Like you're referring it to being like a hint at like possible more security changes in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never really thought of that.
I didn't really make that connection, no.
Well,
but it's interesting.
Yeah, well, because they got that fingerprint company, which is supposedly a sensor that's going to be on the next iPhone where you can, unlock it just by swiping your fingerprint, and then it knows that it's you.
I mean, this seems like a really big response to what happened to Matt Honan from Wired. I know Seth said that yesterday because, like, I was reading through the support document earlier, and there's this whole section about why you want to use two-factor, and the first thing they list is you don't want someone hacking into your iCloud account and being able to wipe your computer. And of all things that your Apple ID and your iCloud account are capable of, that's the thing that took down Matt Honan and caused the whole incident. So I mean, that was the first thing they listed. So I think it's fairly clear, but I really like your idea too. I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I think what's your thoughts on fingerprint scanning in the next iPhone? Do you feel like it's something that is necessary, or is it actually a cool feature that's something to consider?
Well, so Seth plays with a lot of Android phones, and right? Do you?
Yes.
And I know Authentic, which Apple agreed to acquire. I don't know if that went through yet.
They like license it now, or they're like
they were or are in a lot of Android phones.
Yeah.
Really familiar with how it's implemented. I'm sure Seth can.
Yeah, the Motorola Atrix and a couple other phones had fingerprint readers that you could turn on the phone with. I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a little bit louder, but I think you're good.
Okay. So phones like the Motorola Atrix had a fingerprint reader where you actually, instead of turning it on, you would just wipe your finger across it, and that would turn on. I think Apple's got plans, maybe not just with fingerprint, with turning it off and on, but also with financial transactions. It just seems like Apple's kind of going in that direction.
Yeah, if NFC finally makes it to this iPhone.
Yeah, there's we know that, or we have a pretty good indication that NFC was supposed to be in the iPhone 5, and then it might have been pulled out at the last moment or last couple moments.
See, I see three. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think it's going to make an appearance in the iPhone 5S.
I see if they introduce the fingerprint scanner, there's three reasons that it could be for. One could be for the authentication to say, you are who you are, so that's how you unlock the phone. The second is for payments, so you can actually say, I agree to this payment by scanning your fingerprint so they know it's you. The third would be really interesting is if you could finally, with an iPad, iPhone, whatever it is, have multiple accounts. And so if you swipe it and then it goes and it logs into your account, or somebody else swipes it, that, especially for a family iPad, they swipe their finger and then it logs in to their apps, their data. So I think there's a few different purposes, and I think that's the main reason that Apple hasn't really integrated that yet is, first of all, because it's not truly necessary when you can type in a passcode, but also because they would want to actually, if they're going to spend all of those resources integrating it into the hardware, they'd want to have multiple reasons for integrating that in and figuring out how other developers can use the hardware as well.
I have a few things to add. A fourth point to your first three, which I thought your three examples were really good. What if they could use that, piggybacking on what you said about the new authentication being for the App Store and iCloud being a step in the right direction? Instead of typing in your password to download a new app, you can swipe your finger or whatnot as the password input. Like I can imagine swiping the finger and then it auto-fills in your password. I think that would be very cool and helpful. And the sensors, I assume, Seth can probably attest or reject this, that they're probably advanced enough to be able to do that. Another thing that I was thinking is, if you look at Apple's big acquisitions, and in terms of company size and the money involved and resources, this is a very big acquisition for Apple. This is one of the biggest purchases that they've ever made. I think the agreement was $300 million plus. When you look at what they've purchased in the past, Apple's acquisitions make a huge impact on the company years or months after they're acquired. A few examples. Siri, they bought the company, completely integrated into iOS a year later. PA Semi or whatever, all their system on a chips are based on that. Anabit, same story. And all those Maps companies. You can say what you want to say about Apple Maps, but that's how Apple Maps is built, and that's a huge initiative for them that they're going to continue developing. And if you even go back 20 years, Next, or I don't know if that was 20 years ago, a little bit less, Next, that's the foundation of iOS and OS X right now. So everything Apple buys makes a huge impact on the company. So I think, like Scott was saying, that if they're going to be buying that company and integrating these sensors, I think that it's going to be used for multiple reasons, like Scott said. And, hopefully, ideally, it'll be used for something that we haven't thought of yet. Because, I really look at the old Apple is creating things that, we never thought of yet. And I don't think they've been doing that the last few years. And, hopefully.
No, features like Notification Center and even Siri is kind of like predictable in some sense. And so something where they can actually kind of innovate when it comes to the fingerprint scanner. But at the same time, we've been saying that before even the iPad came out, where I remember right before the iPad came out, everyone was saying that it was going to have some sort of special sensors where you could like hover over it and it had like special cameras within the screen that could view where your fingers were, and it was just ridiculous stuff like that. So it's been a long time. It's been a long time that we've been like imagining what could be, and then it comes to the keynotes, and we're like, oh, that's just what it normally is.
In terms of the hardware, like Seth's showing, where are they going to put it? Like I know the Android phones, they have it on the top.
Yeah, you can see this is the Atrix.
When you hold it in your hand, is it like in a convenient place? Like if you're.
Yeah, it's like if I'm.
It's like you would be like.
I'm just going like that.
See, that's pretty good placement for it, but I don't think Apple could like really. If you look at the phone, it's going to be this design. It doesn't seem like it would be here.
It would make more sense to put it in the home button.
But in the home button?
Oh, I was thinking below the home button.
Or next to it,
or I don't know. It just doesn't seem elegant if they're going to really mess with this.
Then they would get rid of the home button finally.
No, I mean there were purported 5S home button parts this morning. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know.
Those are probably. I mean, assuming those are legitimate, fine. Assuming they're not real, I mean, there's no room under the button to put it. Really, like.
No,
I think like next to it, like Seth was saying, it's plausible. Or what about like on the side? Like if they put it like next to the SIM card slot, like you're holding
that'd
it.
be weird.
There's not enough room to get a full print there.
But if you're left-handed, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the top is actually good because if you're left-handed or right-handed, in the top and the middle, like if you go slight.
I mean, it's not that easy on this design because of the way, like, because that phone is more rounded and it's easier to do.
Right. I mean, I guess they could put it in the back by the camera.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't seem like there's that much space, and that means they would have to redesign the whole antenna structure.
Actually, Jordan and I talked to the other fingerprint company, the kind of Authentix competition, and they have a scanner that's behind the screen, so you can actually, it's behind the display. So you're actually seeing the display, and what they could honestly do is put it behind the lock screen on the iPhone.
So just like put it on slide to unlock?
Yeah, so
the slider only works if it's your finger. That would be cool.
Well, you know, Apple also has a patent for putting the front-facing camera behind the screen.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, between the pixels and stuff. That was kind of weird.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things they can do there.
I think it would be big for the watch, the finger scanners. Maybe. I mean, there's probably some neat things you can do with the watch that you wouldn't really want to do with the phone that involve that. I mean, I can't really think of. Could those sensors be used for biometrics?
I don't know. I'm sure they can. I mean, there's so many different biometric things going on. We were looking at some of this stuff. There's some guy we talked about this before who's got you can get your blood sugar from a sensor, or he's working on the blood sugar. Obviously, diabetics and all those, and athletes. If you want to know how much performance you can get or whatever, if you know you've got a lot of sugar in your blood, you're going to be in good shape. Right?
Yeah, I wear a fuel band. And it's amazing. I really, really like it. I don't take it off. I feel like Tim Cook here.
I was actually, I'm either going to get, because I had the original Up band, but I was going to get either the Fuel band or wait for the Fitbit Flex.
Is that a wrist one, the Fitbit?
Yeah, it's another wrist one that's coming out.
Ooh, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, and it's $100. Yeah, well, that's true. Well, we'll see if it...
I'm interested in the Nike integration in that. I mean, because they're really good partners at the top of the companies. I mean, I can imagine, I think Seth was talking about this, like the iWatch could have a Fuel band built in.
It better have one.
I mean, I think it's going to be like Apple proprietary. I mean, there's really not much you can do with this. It's very basic. It tells you steps, calories, and then they have a proprietary fuel system which gives you a number based on a combination of different things. And each day you have a goal. Like my goal is 3,000, and I have to beat 3,000 points, and then the whole thing flashes goal when I pass 3,000 at night. So.
All right. Well, hopefully, I'm really hoping we hear some more news about the iWatch coming up soon. But let's run into the discussion about Kevin Lynch. So, Mike, what's your opinion on Kevin Lynch? There's been a lot of opinions flying around.
I don't think that, like, I know people were saying like, oh, he defended Flash on the iPhone, so he can't work at Apple. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I would, if I was in his position and they said, hey, we need you to write a blog post defending our position, then, I mean, it's something that he had to do. He may not necessarily agree with it, so I don't think that's a good way to judge whether he's going to be a good fit at Apple or not. I actually don't know what VP of Technology means. That's kind of a made-up thing. And so I don't even know what he's going to be doing there, really. I mean, Johnny Ive is in charge of software. He's in charge of hardware. So what remaining technology is there to even put this guy in charge of? So I don't know what he's going to be doing.
Well, the technologies group it's really everyone that has to do with wireless and everyone that has to do with chipsets that power the Apple devices. And when you really look into the corporate structure, it's not like people who are focused on that chip hardware or the wireless hardware. I mean, it's literally everyone in one group. That technologies group under Mansfield has software people too who do the software programming needing to power the chips and integrate them with iOS and OS 10. Same with integrating the wireless hardware. So, I mean, this could be hardware, software integration, graphics with software integration, and that's something we know he did at Adobe. And you're talking about the title VP of Technology. Bob Mansfield is SVP Technology.
Well,
It's kind of like the Senior Vice President of Operations would logically become the Chief of Operations, or the VP of Marketing would become the SVP of Marketing. So Mansfield, his 2-year contract is done after next year, at the end of next year. It would be unwise for Tim Cook to leave any uncertainty of what's happening in that very critical role in the company, the role of the person who brings hardware and software together, something that Apple has deep in their DNA, without a hire. And I think it's very clear that Kevin Lynch is the next, is Bob Mansfield's replacement.
Mm-hmm.
Which is crazy. I mean, when you think about, a few months ago, Kevin Lynch has been kind of like, I guess, demonized a little bit by the Apple faithful because of his stance on Flash. But I mean, so to be devil's advocate there, I don't know how good he is. I've actually met Kevin Lynch in person. He seemed like a nice guy. But the argument is that Flash was a crappy product, and I think that's been backed up pretty well. And Kevin Lynch is the head of Flash development. So Apple's contention in the Thoughts on Flash thing that Steve Jobs wrote was that Flash was crappy software. Like if Adobe had made Flash really good, like if they had made it work really well on phones, maybe it would be on the iPhone. But the contention is it's got bad security, which we've seen. It has horrible battery life on mobile devices. It's
any devices
crashes. It's just bad software. And who's the head of that software group? That's Kevin Lynch. So like, crap. What is Apple doing? They're hiring a person whose record with software is poor, and I think that's the argument that people are making. And to be frank, like Tim Cook's hiring record isn't fantastic when we're talking about high-level executives. Under his belt, or under his reign, he's hired Mark Papermaster, who Steve Jobs fired about 3 days after getting back from getting a new liver. John Browett, who was immediately hated by everybody, and now Kevin Lynch, one of the people that Apple has like on their front page derided as a poor software developer. I mean, what do you?
I don't think Tim Cook knows what he's doing.
Well, I mean, I think maybe personnel isn't his strong point.
I mean, there's has to be something we're missing. The guy's not an idiot. Apple is not stupid. Tim Cook is not where the buck stops. I mean, he has Scott Forstall advising him, and he has a whole executive team. So, I mean, there was clearly discussion. But,
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously Mansfield would be involved in that, right?
Who?
Mansfield. So
yeah, Mansfield. Mansfield was also, there were the court documents. I mean, they found Papermaster because he was under Mansfield's recommendation, but from what I remember, Papermaster was last on Mansfield's list, but he was on his list.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't even highly recommended by Mansfield. He was just like a name.
Right. Well, probably everybody else was like, no, I don't want to do this job.
And we have we have about a year and a half to go before Mansfield says he's out, and there's a year and a half to correct this wrong it's not even a wrong yet.
Right. Well, we don't know. I mean, I'm sure, that in that Thoughts on Flash letter, they acknowledged that they had been working with Adobe for a long time. So, and I'm sure with Photoshop and all the other applications out there, Apple and Adobe have been working together. So Kevin Lynch would be involved in those conversations and part of those discussions. So they had. I mean, it's not like they just met the guy. He's been part of discussions for a long time, and
Right.
I think what Federici and
Schiller.
Schiller and somebody else too.
No. Schiller and Lynch.
Yeah, but there was somebody else who
Oh,
was
oh, oh.
from Macromedia as well. Anyway, may have had some kind of relationship at Macromedia in the late '90s as well.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Where do you feel like Schiller's relationship? I guess he could have backed up the hire if he felt like he did have good work together at Macromedia.
Yeah, I mean it's 15 years ago, but there was some Twitter stuff that shout outs. Kevin Lynch gave Phil Schiller a shout out or something. So, I mean, maybe I don't know. 15 years.
Optimistically, I look at it this way. Like Apple, the problem with Papermaster and the problem with Browett, those were both very cultural related things. And if you're the guy running a division or something, you're not the hands-on guy building the software. Kevin Lynch didn't program Flash, as far as I know. You guys might know better. But, he was just a leadership role. And Flash conquered the market. Like, they are on a lot of devices. They weren't successful. It was crap software, but, it was successful in terms of getting it out there, I'd argue. I mean, I'm sure probably there will be disagreement with that. But, yeah, and they clearly, like exactly what Seth was saying, they know the guy very well. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was a very cultural thing. Another optimistic way to look at it is this is better than nothing. The original game plan was Mansfield's out, and everything is under Dan Riccio. Chips can be under him, wireless, those could all be under him right now. Instead, it's in a separate division under Mansfield. You get 2 more years of him. And what I was initially thinking was when Mansfield's out, they were going to fold it back into Riccio. And basically that gave Bob Mansfield 2 whole years to transition that whole division under Riccio, which I thought was an excellent idea for Apple, and it was a really good thing for shareholders and consumers and all that. But instead, they're keeping that division around. Riccio clearly knows what he's doing because he was going to run that division anyways. He'll have his insight. Bob Mansfield can stick on as an advisor, which I wouldn't be surprised about whatsoever. And, he'll be retiring in his house with his goats and his horses. That's not a joke, by the way. Like there was like a big controversy with him in the city that he was building his farm in to live on. Yeah, so this is better than nothing. Keeping that division around with a clear leader who fits in culturally is better than just pushing everything under one guy. So, I mean, there's really an optimistic way to look at it.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I don't think he's even officially. Is he even in the address book? He might be like a couple months away from actually starting work.
I don't think he's on the website still.
He left Adobe today.
Oh, did he? Okay. And then I guess at some point in the future, he'll start appearing in Apple events. And
I don't doubt that he would.
I don't think he'll be on the PR bio site yet.
No, he's
still below Mansfield.
He's a vice president.
Right. Which is also kind of amusing because he was a top dog at Adobe, and he's not quite.
He's not even senior now, yeah.
He's not even senior,
Huh.
right? So.
Well, I guess that. Why do you think? I mean, is Mansfield a senior? Yeah, he's senior vice president. So I guess they couldn't have like 2 senior vice presidents.
No. This is just a vice president. There's over 100 of those.
Yeah.
But the reason people are concerned. People are concerned because it's clear that in 2 years from now, Lynch might be Mansfield's replacement. So.
It's not even 2 years; it's a year.
A year and a half now. Yeah.
So.
Okay. Let's talk about the Samsung smartwatch really quick. So, I'm really hoping that the Apple rumors start saying that Apple's working on a time machine, because whatever Apple is supposedly working on is what Samsung quickly creates. So I'm really hoping that they come up with either a time machine or, I don't know, just some sort of magic pills maybe they're working on. So what do you guys think about I mean, we had Microsoft. They came out with what the Slate right before the iPad was supposed to come out, and then it was like the Slate looked like a joke once the iPad was out. So, do you see this as a market where Samsung will get the upper hand right away? Mike, do you want to chime in here? Do you feel like Samsung will have the market before Apple can even get into it?
No, I don't. I don't think it'll. Well, they might take a small part of it, but it's not going to be one of those things like when Apple came out with the iPad and suddenly everybody wanted tablets and everybody wanted iPads. It's not going to be like Samsung comes out with a smartwatch, a Galaxy S watch, and suddenly everybody wants to have a smartwatch.
Yeah.
Because there were tablets before the iPad, but nobody cared. And there have been smartwatches and there will be smartwatches before the iWatch, and nobody will care. It's for some reason, whenever Apple steps into a market, that's when people, like ordinary people, start caring about it. And even, I mean, Samsung has been making, smartphones and stuff for a while, but they just still don't have that same drive that Apple has, and people don't care as much about anything that any other brand does as they do Apple. So until Apple steps into that market, nobody's going to care about it. I mean, look at the Pebble. The Pebble it's a fairly nice piece of equipment, but regular. It's nicer than most on the market. Okay, I mean, you tried that one that was not great. I've tried some that were not great. The Pebble, I know people who have Pebbles and they love them. So, even though it's a great watch, it's still not gaining as much traction as, a good watch, a smartwatch should. Because Apple's not in the market. If Apple was in the market, it would be a whole different game, and I think even the Pebble would be more popular if Apple had a watch. Because they just have to bring people's attention to that market. So no, Samsung will not take the market before Apple.
Well, I think they're not bringing any innovation with it. It seems like they're just kind of just building a watch that maybe possibly talks to your phone or is part of a quick ecosystem, but it doesn't seem like it's anything that we haven't expected from Pebble or anybody else. They're just creating their own version of it.
I think the reason that, like Mike was saying, that people really only care about the Apple product, the market, until Apple creates it, reinvents it, or steps in, is because like that whole Apple ecosystem, and no more relevant is that than in the last couple of years or so with iCloud and all these newer Apple devices are all demoted to the same level. And I think something like a watch, it's more than a phone or a computer or a tablet. Something you always have on you, and it's not a platform or a phone replacement. It's something that is a new way to experience what you already have. And given Apple's past track record and the entire ecosystem that exists, I think that's going to be unmatched in terms of translating over to a watch, being able to access all the content, because it's really it's really another window into your already existing stuff. And Samsung and Android, it's so fragmented and whatnot, and not a clear place where to access your content, your other stuff. So Apple will dominate, I think, because of that. And it's also, I think, going to be a time thing. It's going to be really, I think Apple, like based on the current rumors, they want to get the thing out by the end of the year. I think it's very strategic. They're trying to go head-to-head with Google Glass. I think if Samsung gets the watch out first, I don't know. Based on past history, I think Samsung will wait for what Apple does and then copy it, but we'll see.
Well, weren't you the one that actually you were saying that the watch was going to be its own platform, or was that somebody else last week?
No, I said I hope it is.
Oh, but you don't think it will be?
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think the main, with Samsung's last event, they were trying to create their own ecosystem. They had their own $300 home sync that hooks up to your TV, which I can't believe that it was that expensive. And they're trying to make it so that you can have stuff talk between your devices. So it seems like they're trying to go beyond what what Google provides and create
Apple
their own
has 10 years.
ecosystem.
See, what I think I completely agree that Samsung is trying to do that, but they're packing it all into a couple of years. Apple has 10 years under their belt of gradually building up this ecosystem. So with the entire ecosystem there as a foundation, it's easy to just keep plopping devices on it. But you can't put out the devices first and then tack the ecosystem on top of that and then try to do everything at once. Apple is, we say Apple's terrible at scaling cloud services, but they're pretty damn good at scaling an ecosystem. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, Samsung has gotten their phones into the hands of so many people without even having an ecosystem.
Right, but I'm saying in terms of like other devices other than a phone.
That's true. So if they want to go beyond the phone, yeah, I think that'll be kind of interesting to see how that works. If they want to grow to have a smartwatch, I think the smartwatch will be the first place where we see if they're able to go beyond just a phone, and if they're able to go into TV, computer, all the different other places. I mean, the thing is that they don't provide any of their own operating systems, though. So
who, Samsung?
Samsung, yeah. I mean, they work on Windows.
System is their own.
That's true.
I couldn't hear that.
The TV operating system is their own.
Oh, cool.
Smart TV.
They don't use like Google TV or anything?
They had no, they don't have any Google TVs. They were gonna. I think they had some planned and they never came out. LG uses Google TV as do a couple other. Speaking of LG, it's not just Samsung that's supposed to be building a watch. We learned today that Google, LG, and probably everybody else is also working on a watch, and it'll probably be the same story as the iPhone and the iPad. So.
Yeah, well, everyone wants to make sure that they're not behind on it. They want to make sure that they're on it right away.
Right, and actually, to be fair, Sony, of all companies, has a watch. They've had a watch for about a year, and I actually tried it, and it's crap. But they have a watch. It's touch-enabled, connects to your Android or iPhone through Bluetooth. The problems with it, I think Gizmodo called it the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of man. The problem, it's a watch, and it's got a like a bad OLED display, and if you're outside, you can't see the face. So, like, with the sun, you just cannot see your watch face. So it's totally useless outside. And then inside, it's very buggy, very like jaggy swipe, and then like 3 seconds later, the thing goes by. So really poor implementation, but Sony did try it. And there are, like, to be fair, there are some things that actually work with it. So, like, if you get a Facebook message or a Twitter tweet, whatever, it'll come across the watch. So, I mean, that technology is already out in rudimentary form, besides the Pebble. So, I don't know.
But I feel like if Apple is going to go into this, they have to go beyond what everyone else is going to offer, and then of course everyone's going to duplicate it. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they. And I think the main point is what Mark brought up, is that it's going to be part of an ecosystem which others can't provide. So I think that's the main selling point, is to say it adds on rather than being its own product.
We'll see. I mean, it could be both. It could be it's a standalone device, but lots of people are going to want it as a stacked-on product. And when you look at what would they price an accessory at, and could they really market an accessory? An accessory is their next big thing. Like an I mean, there's just so much that will go that behind the scenes, strategic-wise, it needs to be thought about for this product. And more than anything Apple's ever done before, I'm really excited to see how they do this strategically, because a tablet, computer replacement, addition to a computer, it's very clear cut. A phone is extremely clear cut. A TV is very clear cut. It's something you got on your wall, access your content. But a wrist device can just go so many ways, and so that's why I think it's going to be very exciting. And they only got one shot at this. I mean, Apple is not in a position to screw up and try again. Monetarily wise, money in the bank wise, yes. Stockholder wise and consumer expectation wise, they are in a very vulnerable spot if they screw this up. It's better to do nothing than something that's wrong the first time. Apple needs to measure twice, cut once. Yeah.
Let's talk about one more thing here, the Google Now controversy. Where I don't know if it's too much of a controversy, but it seems like there's a little bit of Eric Schmidt saying that Apple will be able to say whether or not they're going to have Google Now on the store, or if it's never going to appear. I think, for me, Eric Schmidt was more saying the only way for Google Now to appear on iOS is if they want to deeply integrate it into iOS and part of the operating system. And so Eric was pretty much, for me, saying, hey, go talk to Apple and see if they're ever going to open up their ecosystem to allow us to kind of replace Siri. But most news places kind of assumed that meant check and see if it's in the App Store. And then everyone asked Apple, and they were like, yeah, Google's now not in the App Store. So do you think that it's, I guess, Mark, what do you think about that? Is it something where Eric was saying, oh, we submitted it, go ask them? Or is it something where he's like, oh, Apple, go ask them?
I actually disagree with both sides of the argument. I know what you described was the popular opinion. Like, some people thought this, some people thought that. So I'm not disagreeing with you personally. I'm disagreeing with what the popular opinion was. I think it's a third thing. I think he was just talking about, well, first of all, maybe he just doesn't know what he's talking about. But if he did know what he was talking about, he could have just been referring to, we're going to have to submit this thing, and Apple is going to be the one who approves it. Now, based off of Apple and Google's past history in terms of app approvals, nobody should be surprised that he doesn't think this is a clear-cut process. Based on Google Voice and other stuff that Google's tried to do on iOS, who knows if this is going to get approved. Also stuck in the approval process was that Google search update with a little bit of Google Now integration. Knowing that past history, I would say the same thing. It's up to Apple to approve it. He never said they submitted it, and he never said they didn't submit it. I think these comments were completely taken out of context, and I don't think enough thought was put into it. And
I think the interesting thing is
another thing that was interesting. Oh, go ahead. I'll say it after you.
No, you can go because I forgot now.
Okay. When people were saying that Google Maps was submitted to the App Store, people ran to Apple PR and said, "Hey, was this true?" Apple PR obviously told them, "Nope, that's not true. That Google hasn't submitted anything to us." And all these people said people familiar with the matter, sources, or secret source inside Apple told us. But clearly it's all bullshit. Everyone just talks to Google, Apple PR off the record. But with this story, Apple was happy to say no. Apple spokesperson said no, they didn't. And it's funny because it's the same places who said Google didn't submit Google Maps. They all have secret sources, but now they don't have secret sources, and PR talks to them now. So just thought that was interesting.
With Google, they have enough money to make a whole entire application and then risk that it's going to sit there and that Apple's never going to approve it. But it's interesting to think that Apple doesn't have a way where you can just consult them and say, this is what I want to do. I've read over the guidelines. Now, will this go through? Without having to spend the $50,000, $60,000 developing the application and then not having it approved because it doesn't align with what they're trying to do.
I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that some of the bigger companies and Apple partners, they have like a direct line through Apple and say, hey, we're going to build this app. Will you submit? Will you approve it? And I wouldn't be surprised that they're in active talks about this application. I know there's other apps who've,
Well, I mean, Google obviously didn't have that great of a connection if Google Voice sat there for so long.
Ooh, I mean, I think that was a tricky situation. I mean, the FCC got involved.
Yeah, I think AT&T might have been involved with that as well. It wasn't just Apple. I also think that I'm fairly certain that Google has some back channel communications with Apple, and they're not just going to, I think they said they weren't going to build some app because they didn't think Apple would approve it. I can't remember which one. But there's definitely, I mean, they're not just guessing about what Apple's going to approve and not going to approve. The fact that that video leaked out for a little bit, though, like, come on. Like, that's not an accident. Like, Google's putting that out there, probably said, hey, Engadget, check this out. And then took it down. And then, okay, it's now it's everywhere. And now what is Apple going to do? They're going to say, no, we're not going to approve it when it comes time to approve. Or maybe Google's doing their back channel communication saying, hey, we're almost ready to get this we're almost ready to submit this Google Now update to the App Store. Here, take a look at it. And Apple's, like, okay, we'll look at it, and then doesn't get back to them. And Google's like, what's going on? Apple doesn't get back to them, and then Google's like, all right, here, Engadget, take a look at it. And then, oh, this is how we're going to get Apple to make a decision on this or talk about it or whatever.
Yeah, to push it. That's interesting.
There's so many things that could be going on behind the scenes. I know for a fact that Google's not like every other app developer, and they don't just submit things haphazardly to the App Store approval process like everybody else. I mean, maybe they do at the end, and maybe like the process is the same, but there's also back channel communications.
Yeah, I think it was either Apple or Google. They said they have monthly meetings. The two companies have monthly meetings. I mean, I could be getting confused with different companies, but
yeah, I'm sure they do.
I wouldn't be surprised if they have monthly meetings just to talk about, like
search, YouTube.
Exactly. Because search is integrated in Safari. There's other Google services built into the phone.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead and we'll wrap up today's talk. Thank you guys very much for joining us, but we will be back next week, same time, same place. And thank you very much.